Greenland fossils reveal global ecosystem recovery after mass extinction. About 252 million years ago, roughly 90% of all the species on planet Earth went extinct. An extinction, according to Encyclopaedia Britannica, is classified as the dying out or termination of species, which happens when species are diminished because of either environmental forces or evolutionary changes in the members of a community. During one of the largest extinction events on Earth at the end of the Permian era, the Earth suddenly became barren, carbon dioxide levels rose, ultraviolet radiation skyrocketed, and the ocean became more acidic. Animals from the ocean with spinal cords moved onto land, then went back into the water as they desperately tried to adapt to the rapidly changing environment. The communities of life that lived on the bottom of the ocean during the Triassic period also experienced rapid diversification over time. Why? There are different theories on this, which include meteor impacts, volcanism, or a greenhouse effect caused by the release of methane from the seafloor. This experiment by Michael Zaton and colleagues involved the discovery of fossils of one species that seemed to kickstart the post-Permian Triassic extinction recovery based off of morphological findings and other evidence found in East Greenland. The species these researchers studied were Boreal microconchids, which had tube modification and taxic diversification in order for them to keep up with their drastically changing environment. These organisms that survived had rapidly evolved in order to keep up with these environmental changes, which scientists think it actually led to the evolution of eventually mammalian traits. Researchers from Uppsala University set out to evaluate the relationship between mass extinction events and the evolution of aquatic animals. In order to determine this relationship, researchers collected 131 shell samples and large rock slabs that had microconchids in them. These samples were collected from Greenland from the age of the Permian-Triassic boundary, indicating that pre- and post-Permian extinction fossils were collected. Interestingly, the tube shapes and lengths of the microconchids varied among the layers. The newer the layer was, the less coiled the organism was. The researchers argue that this is to avoid being buried in sediment. It is also noted that the diversity of microconchids increased over time with migration and adaptation of characteristics. Dr. Niedzwiecki argues that this research demonstrates global extinction recovery. By finding new microconchid species, there is an indication of environmental opportunism that caused a successful survival and perpetuation of life in these species. According to first author Michael Zaton, microconchids were globally diversifying around 252 million years ago. Much of this diversification was likely due to the harshness of environmental conditions shortly after and during mass extinction events of this era. Morphological features such as ribbing, height of the tentacles, and tightness of spiral formation suggest that these organisms were having to quickly adapt to changes in their environment in order to survive. It is also significant that these microconchids were found at such high latitudes, even in ancient Pangea. This indicates that the Permian extinction was indeed a worldwide event that affected even the depths of the northernmost oceans. Other research supports the conclusion that while many life forms were lost during this time, life forms that did survive diversified rapidly. One paper we found gave strong evidence for the development of a gland system in early cynodonts. These creatures are thought to be the earliest ancestor of mammals because of the structures of their skull, especially their nasal cavity, show similar structures to current mammalian skulls that specifically allow for a gland system. Even more interesting is that other structures in the skull suggest that a nerve pathway existed that is similar to mammals who have sensory whiskers on their face. This suggests that these creatures also had the genetic pathway to produce hair or fur. The specific fossil that gives this evidence is dated at 240 million years old. This is much earlier than the previously thought 252 to 254 million years ago of mammalian trait development. However, this can still be supporting evidence for our claim because if mammalian traits existed before the Great Extinction events, they may have been under selection during and after the massive disaster periods. For example, having sensory hairs may have made it easier for animals to find their way around when the skies were darkened by volcanic ash, and fur may have helped them maintain constant body temperatures during the massive shifts in climate. In a way, the events that happened during the Permian allowed for a massive bottleneck of biodiversity, followed by an opportunity for novel traits to evolve and fill newly opened niches. The end-Permian extinction happened 252 million years ago, but information about how both the aquatic and terrestrial species lived following the extinction is abundant in the fossils from that time. Although numerous mass extinctions have taken place throughout history, we learned in class that the Permian extinction was the most detrimental extinction, with more than 90% of all species disappearing. The end-Permian extinction is significant because it marks the start of the global diversification of the thriving species. This mass extinction greatly reduced interspecific competition and allowed species with previously dominating predators to flourish. Ecological niches were also freed up, which encouraged species to diversify. The diversification of the microconchids can be used to estimate what the post-Permian recovery looked like because of how largely successful they became following the extinction. Overall, the idea of adapted radiation summarizes the trends that follow the mass Permian extinction and helps understand how species perpetuate.